Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have Trevor back. He was one of my very first experts on Ask the Experts. And we're going to talk about Helix Project. We're going to look at the Kickstarter, but I also have Rocky from Comics Boom and Dr. Soup. How are you doing today, Rocky? We'll start there.
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be here again, once again, being on your channel, and especially when I get an opportunity to promote my friend's comic book, Helix Project. I'm certainly going to take advantage of it. So good to see everyone here. Good to meet you, Doctor Soup, and hello to Trevor.
You too.
I'm excited. We are going to talk about the Justice League stuff later and Daniel Cherry, but we want to talk about this because it's phenomenal. Like I usually hype stuff up, but I also have a bit of I don't know. This one's different. It's fun, it's great. I'm not a huge person when it comes to like Green Lanterns aren't my favorite. I like something more grounded. And this one actually is really good. So Trevor, you have number 4. Are you
Yeah.
excited?
Yeah, super stoked. It's just weird, to be halfway through the series. I think back about a year ago, when we were kind of boots to the ground trying to get number 1 out, and just thinking about and wondering about whether or not it was going to be sustainable, whether or not people were going to like it, so on and so forth. So, the fact that thanks to folks like you and Rocky and like Second Street Marvel there in the chat, I've been afforded the opportunity to get more than halfway through this story with seemingly most people enjoying it. So I couldn't be better, honestly. It's the start to a dream.
It's kind of amazing, honestly. Like you said a little over a year ago, wanting to get this project off, and you're on number 4. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty dang good. A lot of times with different Kickstarters and stuff, you don't know. You don't know the speed in which it'll arrive. And um just recently, like even with plot holes, that one was really far behind. And I
yeah.
just I was like, don't get me wrong, I love the story and I like Sean Gordon Murphy and um but it for a professional, it was pretty far behind. Like you were kicking ass and taking names at this speed, and that's super rare. And I wouldn't let's show the Kickstarter so everyone can see kind of what we're talking about. It. Why don't you tell everyone the premise of the story?
Yeah. So, well, thank you. First of all, it's a hustle. I'm hungry to get these books out there and to share this story with as many people as I possibly can. But essentially, it's primarily a 1970s like UFO hysteric sci-fi noir story. The short and sweet of it, which you can find on the Kickstarter page, and how I often like to introduce people to the story, is that the half-breed son of an extraterrestrial who masqueraded as human for decades witnesses his father's death after saving a human child. A selfless act that resulted in the exposure of his father's alien physiology. Tortured by the loss, the son, Kent, spends 15 years struggling to pick up the pieces until he's mysteriously confronted by someone claiming to have been there the day that his father was taken from him, and that they have a means of getting him back, I should say, his father. And so Kent is now driven to uncover the circumstances surrounding his father's now supposed murder, and struggles to reconcile his dueling sense of identity, is led further into the jaws of this Cold War genetics conspiracy. And what's left of him is forced to confront a twisted ghost from his past as it plunges a dagger into everything he knows, or everything he's come to know about himself and what it really means to be human. So yeah, it's a super personal story. If you want to get a little bit more in-depth look at the context surrounding the story and a little bit of the art, all of that is on the Kickstarter page. But that's probably the way that I've most succinctly learned how to describe it.
The art's so good too for an indie. I mean, honestly, there was a couple places I noticed a little bit of lack of expression, but other than that, and that was mostly in the woman. But honestly, other than that, you don't know what to expect, and I really enjoyed this story. Now everything's here if you guys. I pinned the link, and it's also in the description. But if you look at, I'm getting some notifications here. If you look at some of this, and what we've seen in the trailer too, you can notice right away how well done and detailed the art is. I like his use of color. I know I said that the first time around, but I
Yeah.
really think he does a good job with it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm really thankful to be working with the talent that I've had the pleasure of working with. Most of my team has been in the industry for a decade, 1 decade, some of them two. And when it came down to coming out with my first project, I wanted it to be the highest caliber possible. And while I think that in some ways I could deliver that, I also was frighteningly aware of my inexperience, and so I very much wanted to cover the bases and compensate for that by bringing in talent who just know the industry, just know and the collaborative process better than I do. And thankfully, these guys have delivered every single time, and I think improved every single time, which I couldn't be more thankful for.
I got to
Thank you.
say, I just want to add the comment here that it really is something. As someone who I do a lot of support for my own Kickstarters and Indiegogo, and it's one thing for Trevor to start off like this, but to be honest with you, I mean, I had my doubts. I mean, he's my friend and all, but I had my doubts. I mean, he's starting. He's basically starting from nothing. He doesn't have a name for himself. All he has is he's got his passion. He's got his passion and he's got his arrogance and there's that old expression when you don't realize that you don't exactly have all the tools. That's a good thing because you don't know it can't be done, and then all of a sudden you do it, and then and he didn't just do it once, he did it 4 times. And I've been there through it with him with the high points and the low points, and he's stuck with it. And the quality is fantastic. He's on time, he delivers the product, and it's a really good story. And I'm not just talking out of my ass. This is a really good story. And like I said, this is, I mean, I got plot holes too. You mentioned plot holes, not to pick on Sean Gordon Murphy, but a lot of, waited a long time for that product. And,
Mhm.
and it's a little bit, it says something that when the pros are screwing up, but you got young, like Trevor, kudos to you. I mean, you put 4 issues together during a pandemic, not just one, and you did it on time, and you did it through as much stress and anxiety as the pros, and you stuck with it. And I'd like to see it rewarded. And the cover is fantastic. The card stock, having received it, it's really great stuff. Very well put together, the page quality and everything else. Certainly better than your Marvel, your Marvel comic, which could almost like crumple in your hands. And better than DC. This is good quality stuff and great story and on time. And I really encourage people to, don't take my word for it. Just go pick it up, order it. It's going to arrive on your door on time. And you can certainly pick up the digital copy, but I mean, reward yourself. Trust me, reward yourself. Get all 3 physical copies. I'm assuming are there still physical copies of all 3 issues available still, Trevor?
Yeah, so this is going to be the last campaign where the first print of issue 1 is going to be available. We're getting really, really close to selling out. So if you do want to make sure that you are getting all of the first print copies, this will probably be the last time they're available through this Kickstarter, which, by the way, like, tonight will pretty much mark the end of the first week, and we are a stone's throw away from $5,000, which I would love to hit on stream tonight. So if you guys want to show some love, click the link in the description, check it out. Get yourself the last available first print copies of issue 1. And for the collectors out there were only 750 copies of issue 1 printed. And I do plan on doing a reprint with a totally different cover, but now's the time to do it if you want to make sure that you have it from the jump. So yeah, and with Kickstarter projects like these, if we don't reach the goal, the book doesn't get made. I mean, artistically, the book is done. The book is going to letters within the next week or two. So, that the product will be delivered, and it will be delivered at a high quality. But costs are a very real obstacle for small guys like me. So consider checking out the Kickstarter. Let this issue get made, because I mean, every time I feel like myself and the team have found ways to improve upon what we've done before and to take really serious strides in the storytelling. And I don't think that 4 is going to be an exception to that.
I love how, like, seriously, I was looking while you were talking, I was looking at the different ones, and they're like, Yeah, you can get a digital copy, right? Yeah, of course. But you can also kind of go to Comixology, but $5. That's insanely cheap.
Yeah, I really don't make any money. Like I honestly, and what little I do make goes back into my publishing company. Um, so all I can say is, support it now because I'm putting out this material very much at the cost of my own blood, sweat, tears, and money. Um, I don't I don't profit really off of these issues right now. What I'm trying to do is deliver the best quality I possibly can, whether it's the content of the book, the artwork, the direction of it, and obviously the physical product. And I'm trying to get to a point where I can sustain this high quality and just build the audience so that way I can order more copies. The expense per comic goes down, and then maybe I can start making money. But the last Kickstarter, issue 3, um, was such a like down to the wire situation where, the moments like that do scare me because I don't want to get to a point where I have to dilute the physical printing quality of the book or charge more money. Like if you guys support this now, I can keep up at this pace. So unfortunately there is a certain amount of this that makes me dependent on folks to support the book, and I would like to maintain this quality, if not get better, you know. So
Well, I
yeah.
can say this. I will say, and Tristan, you got to jump on board with me. I've made it very clear to Trevor that when he gets his first Batman gig, I want a signed Batman CGC 9.8 delivered to my door. And
Exactly.
because if if a comic collector that's been collecting as long as I have can't take advantage of a friend who makes it big, I mean, come on. I mean, so this is the beginnings of greatness, and that's what I love about this. And I've said to Trev before, I said that the privilege that I have, and that guys and people like yourself, Tristan, have, is that we get to watch. I mean, we get to watch
Right.
from the beginning, and that's what I love about this. And I mean, I say that with some degree of, in my old age, some degree of ego and arrogance, but I love this, and I'm living vicariously through you, Trevor, and and even just little things like the main character in Area 51. I mean, how can you not think of Clark Kent? How can you not
Yeah,
think? I mean,
that's what I thought of too.
There's Superman Easter eggs there in the first issue that just sort of cry out, and you know, I think it's really good. Maybe Trevor, maybe comment on that. What was your thinking behind naming it Kent, and maybe just maybe give some listeners sort of a insight into what you were thinking.
Yeah, so we're definitely drawing a lot of comparison. One of the major themes of this story is identity and the types of effects, beneficial and adverse, that can have on a human being, on a person. And so when you look at the idea of Superman and why Superman was so easily accessible, to the masses, and has ultimately become this icon and this symbol for hope, is because he looked the way that people wanted him to look. He looked like the people that were on the top of the social food chain. Um, Kent, his father, natively do not. They have the ability to manipulate their DNA on a molecular level and choose to wear a face in order to blend in. But it's not honest. It's not honest to themselves. And unfortunately, in the 70s, where this story primarily takes place, it's such a socially tumultuous time, where we're beginning to break those boundaries, but the culture is beginning to understand about a little bit more about how we're dehumanizing people, based on things that are so easily disregardable. And for me, part of exploring Kent and his character was doing so as a sort of mirror image to Clark. Despite the fact that Clark obviously had to keep secrets growing up, and in certain iterations, him having to keep that secret has cost him a lot. I think that ultimately, you know, you can draw that comparison between Clark and the first time he saved somebody in public, and sort of displayed these feats of incredible strength and power. But when Ken's father does it, what happens? Right, because he looks different, somebody's afraid of him, and fear, I mean, Dune just came out. You guys know the phrase, man, fear is the mind killer. And when somebody simply looks different than you, it kind of ticks off something in our monkey brains sometimes, and we have to be better than that. So yeah, without getting super preachy, there was definitely a comparison to be made between Clark Kent's experience and our Kent Armstrong, and his family for sure.
I love now I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to spoil anything, but I love his decision at the end of the first one. Even if that decision was then, taken away from him, but I love the idea that he was still it it shows you his level of character and being able to forgive, right? Because that's a very, very hard thing. People hold on to grudges for years.
Mm.
And in that moment he realized that it was unneeded. What would his father do in that position?
Yeah, I mean, that was a really big moment. And in terms of like the writing and structural writing, I think a lot of people might have looked at that as a failure of mine as a writer in not giving Kent the agency to be proactive in that situation. But for me, I really wanted to bend that because I think that was despite the fact that, you know, the up until that point, Kent was kind of robbed of his agency because of his dueling sense of identity. Uh, I think the decision to not act and to not give in to those more primal urges, I think that was kind of the moment where he gained a sense of self and he began to accept a little bit more of who he was and where he comes from and the circumstances that have kind of been building up until that moment. So yeah, that was a super big moment. And in the society that we live in, I think sometimes um, we overglorify acting on impulses. And for me, the strength of that moment was in Kent deciding not to act on the impulse. And despite his extreme cynicism, to pull back and acknowledge that the lessons of his father, um, will ultimately bear like a greater fruit than acting on those sort of darker urges.
And I actually really like the dichotomy between him and of course her name slips my mind.
Well, we can call
Um
it M. We can call it M for now. Yeah.
okay. Um the dichotomy, because they are clearly, the difference between being relatively pacifist and just being full blown, determined, I guess is the best word. Like determined to a great deal where you
Mm,
would set your life out to do something. Like, yeah, I like it, but in the back of my head, because like I said before, I reread it again last night, and I'm like, there's something going on with this girl. Like,
mm, mhm.
she is just too determined. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I love. If you can sit here and that's why I praise so much like Department of Truth and stuff like that. If you can sit here for hours or days afterward and I'm going back in my head like, well, could it be this? Could it be that? Like if you're making me think, you've done your job.
Yeah,
You've done
I want to add
above
to
your
that.
job.
I want to add to that because the female protagonist here, and I'm assuming she's a protagonist. Even there's some element of mystery about her. She appears to be the older version of a younger girl that appears earlier in the first issue, and but like you said, Tristan, she's very kick-ass and she's
Mhm.
very determined, and lethal. So it's funny if we're gonna compare Kent, if we're gonna draw analogies as Trevor has, or at least slippery slope analogies to Clark Kent for the main protagonist. This woman, this M character that Trevor calls her at this point, she's more kick-ass than Lois Lane. She's got a bug up her chimney about something, and she's interesting. And I'm wondering, Trevor, if you could, because to me that's the biggest question mark so far, and I'm uh, at the end of issue 3 in any event. She's a question mark, and she's got me really intrigued in terms. So I'm wondering if you could you give us any insights into what you were thinking when you were scripting her character?
So I mean, she's definitely evolved from the early planning stages, as all of the characters have. They all kind of they end up taking on lives of their own once you write them long enough. Um, And so for her, I mean, I kept this cast tight because I wanted each of them in some ways to be mirrors of one another, um, in very, very intimate ways. So you look at Kent and that sort of obsession, right? That sort of sadness that's been marinating for the last 13 years, that since his dad had passed away. And it renders him kind of totally inactive, you know, that trauma. And he is so much at war with himself that he literally doesn't know what to do with himself. Uh, and then you have Marissa, who, you know, we'll obviously learn a little bit more and more about as the series goes on, but she is kind of the opposite. You know, you look at how different stimuli will affect different types of people, and she, man, she's just a doer. Is all I can say. She is just a doer, and you know, in some degrees, you know, she does sort of represent another side to this dichotomy that Kent very well could have been, and he very much could have been a monster. You know, he has this great potential to manipulate his DNA in any way whatsoever that he sees fit. Um, and so you look at somebody like Marissa, if she was given that potential, well, I mean, we'd be in for a bit of a mess. And it's ironic that Kent, who has this incredible power, this incredible potential, is just kind of rendered, you know, pacifist. And rendered innocuous because of his emotions, and her being the opposite. You know, and then we'll get into actually come issue 4 begins to kind of poke at it, but we get specific with issue 5, and even how the antagonist of the series, Colonel Winters, is sort of completes that trinity of mirroring aspects of Kent's character, and how trauma can sort of propagate along someone's life and change who they become as a human being. So yeah, Marissa, and partly for her is also like the intrigue as a storyteller. You know, I like the idea of her just kind of coming in here and wrecking shop, and everybody's like, why? But why though? What's her MO? Um, and it may be something complex. It may be something super simple. You know, I'm not a religious person, and I always say, you know, we're a planet of 8 billion apes, and sometimes we just act on certain impulses. But for her, you know, clearly she is tactical and technical, and there's something driving her in a deeply emotional and psychological way that I'm really excited to explore. But again, doing so in this kind of dichotomy with Kent, and looking at them as these sort of parallels. And who knows, perhaps given certain points in the plot of our story, maybe those parallels begin to diverge a little bit more than we would care to let them.
So I want to know, Dr. Soup, I know you're being very quiet. What do you think of all this?
You don't want to know. I'm kidding. It's really good. I just wanted to say I love the art. It's just so appealing. I know that was probably a terrible way to describe it, but it's so good, and I think you did a great job with all of it.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
I think there's a draw to this, and I've read a lot of indie books. I've had gone through my fair share, and I talk about a lot of them highly. You know, I've had quite a few people on here, but I would say this is top 1 or 2, absolutely. The way that you do, and I'm gonna go back to that in issue 1, because this is being printed again, right? So this is the last time, so I want to get people to know. There's a part in issue 1 where the coloring is so good. The whole thing is so intense that there's not a religious aspect, but a prayer in the background. And you honestly, this whole part kind of like, I don't know that I took a breath. It was so good. It was so intense. And then there's another part that I really, really thought that was, I almost posted the picture today, and I'm like, I didn't get permission. You see Kat, and he's it's 3 panels down at the bottom. I can picture it right in my head. and he's going like the 9 to 5, the 9 to 5, the day to day, the day to day. And you can just see that emotion in his face, like that. It's, I got to do the same thing tomorrow. Got to do, and his mother. There's a lot of really good in here. And it's not just all exposition dump. It's not everything that you're going to get through necessarily, maybe even dialogue. A lot of it is instilled in that art.
Mhm.
And it draws you in. And the way that, and I praised you on this last time, so I feel like I'm overdoing it, but like the way he is with his mom, I love those simple little things you added in, that familial bond, because his dad is gone, right? So having that familial bond added in there, I love it. I love it. I can't say enough good. I really think you have something special here. I don't think this is going to be the end, but it's definitely a good beginning.
I appreciate that. Yeah, really, thank you.
I just want to go. I want to comment further. There's a great scene in issue 3 where artist Marcelo Salazar does a really great job where the Helix Project. I mean, the title, the Helix Project. There's that symbol of course, the helix symbol in biology, of course, and of course that's Trevor. I know you're falling back on your background in biology, and I thought it was really cool. There's very subtle panels where it shows helixes, the genetic helixes, and it leads. It's a hint of a transformation that's taken place in between the panels, and I thought it's very well done, and it's needed because it shows. Because if you're wondering, because at some point I flip the page and I see there's been a transformation that's taken place, and I flip back and I think, that's what's happening. And so you're getting these artistic hints and you're very good at, because I know that you and I, we've joked, we talk and we joke about Bendis as dialogue heavy, and you're actually, you put your money where your mouth is. You're not, when you can rely on it's clear that when you can rely on the artist, you choose to rely on the artist as opposed to dialogue. And that's a very impressive thing to do. And clearly not a lot of writers can do that. I think there's a tendency for a lot of writers nowadays to sort of like to write it because, I'm not really sure if their artist is going to do this. So I'm going to spell it out for them, and I'm going to spell it out and be exposition heavy. And you're very creative and very, you resist that temptation to be, overly verbose, and that's a credit to the collaboration I think you have with your artist, and so it's very well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, comics are a visual medium, and a lot of folks go into it not fully acknowledging that. They just use the visual component to be. Sorry, I saw a couple things in the chat with a couple Karens.
I know. I warned someone not to be rude. Like, are we really that petty?
No, it's okay, man. I honestly, like, I don't need Karens buying my book and then complaining about it later. So, bye. Good riddance. Anyways,
you're missing out. You're the only one missing out. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I really, it's cool. Anyways, what was the question again? Could you?
We're just talking about your collaboration with your artists and the way that you don't use the art, the way that you don't you don't you don't use a lot of exposition when you don't need to. You allow the artist to work their magic and tell the story.
Oh yeah, thank you. So yeah, what I was getting with that is that sometimes when people transition to writing comics or begin writing comics, I get it. Like you're the writer and you want to indulge and you want to be poetic or beautiful in some ways. And I don't think that that's really our job. I mean, there are moments where we can make it happen, but it has to be tasteful. And there's also something to be said about focusing in the reader. Like my main goal is to provide an experience. And because comics are more visual than they are textual, I want somebody to be pulled in and have to really pay attention to slight changes in the character's expression or in camera angle. Like Tristan brought up this scene, this sequence in issue 1 where we kind of have Kent going through the 9 to 5 grind, and the whole point of that moment was to sort of convey how exhausted and closed in and isolated he feels by this boring life that he lives day to day, despite these things that he's capable of doing. And so, you know, in that moment, there's a sequence of 3 panels where, if you notice, Kent's body language and his facial expressions are very flat and they stay the same throughout, but the backgrounds change, so it's showing this change of time, but this maintenance of feeling and sort of hardness and, that lack of emotion. So, yeah, the visual component's super important, and I certainly don't want to step on any of my artists' toes because they're so good at what they do. And I think part of my job as a writer is also to bring that out the best way I possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. I sorry, I was watching the chat. Like, yeah, I got into the same rabbit hole you did. So, yes. Before cuz we are going to talk about other topics and then we'll check back on this towards the end. But before we move on, kind of um tell us your last little pitch here. Why everyone should, besides what we've said. You've got some great books here. I think everyone needs to check them out. But your commercial. Let's go.
Well, I mean, ultimately, why would I point you towards the book? I mean, we're hungry. We're hungry to tell stories. We're hungry to tell good stories that matter, that ultimately sort of poke at aspects of the human experience using interesting genre and, um, making it almost a cinematic experience on the page. Like Rocky, for example, has known me for a very long time, and if I can say anything about myself and my aspirations, is I want to be one of the best one day. I really do, desperately so. But in order to do that, I have to continue self-critiquing and adjusting and making the best possible comics I can, and finding new ways to best take advantage of this medium because it's so broad and there's so much you can do to play to the experience, the reading experience, and to play to the reader and control the way that they read or engage with the material. I'm desperate to be able to go out there and tell those stories and to, hopefully deliver content that really connects with people and, you know, might change the way they think about something. And if not, you know, makes them feel better about a certain part of themselves or the lives that they've lived. It's, it's a super important project. I've done the best that I can at my own expense to deliver the highest possible quality um, possible. Like you guys had said, I mean, we're printing on paper stock that's 2 times thicker than what you're getting at Marvel or DC right now. And I'm not, and I'm, and in some regards, I'm charging less because there's no ads. It's 24 pages of straight story. I have a very stern philosophy about creative integrity and the integrity of somebody who is creating a product for people to purchase. And I want to deliver value in every way that I possibly can. So yeah, I'm hungry to be great. I'm hungry to show off the incredible talented people that I work with, and deliver something to you all that is worth more than what you pay for.
You can totally just see the crazy in her eyes. I'm just saying, just putting it out there. And I totally realized that when you were talking, I didn't have my mic muted, and I was kissing on my kitty, and all you guys probably heard was, sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're going to check back on this.
Sure.
Here in just a little bit. And I have it pinned for everyone who is interested in the in the chat. Second Street Marvel. Let's check out the chat here just a little bit. Marvel prints on cheap wax paper. You can literally see through the pages without holding it up in a light. Oh.
Also, yeah, I do want to shout out Second Street Marvel.
He's awesome.
Publicly, man, he's been such a champion of the stuff that we're doing. And I'm so thankful, man. I'm so thankful to have folks like Trinity, who believe in the work and who believe in, putting out stories that are unhinged and tethered by these corporate interests that are true and honest. And he took the time to buy extra copies and deliver them to his shop, and that it really means a lot to me. And I know he said a lot of kind things about me in the book, and I just want to say thank you. So just a public thank you to Trinity and Second Street Marvel and his community of people for embracing this story, man. It really means a lot. So thank you.
Great channel over there. Robert or Hooded Justice, can you guys put it in the chat? Make sure you guys check him out. He's so positive. Like whenever I don't know if I'm a glutton for punishment or what, but yeah, Rocky went on with me to do some debates, and Second Street Marvel's so good about just being like, just let him talk and shut up. Just leave, like, just do your thing. You're doing good, and I love that. He definitely has the right thing going there. So thank you, Robert. Thank you. I love you, Dr. Soup. You're amazing, but I swear to God, you bring trolls sometimes.
Okay. There was a crazy person in here the second I got here, and
Okay,
it's
well
still
then.
going on. I apologize if I wasn't talking as much. I was trying to like make sure it wasn't getting too crazy in the chat, and it was. So, apologies.
All good. It's the internet. What can you do?
Yeah, exactly. My I may have a tough crowd, but they will support you.
Hey, that's how you know you've
for
made
life
it,
once
man.
you win them over. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say that's how you know you've made it. You gotta have a little bit of it's omelets and eggs. You gotta have a little bit of you're never. It's not all going to be roses, and what Trev's gone through putting all this together. I mean, it's water off a duck's back.
I seen one that said, "I won't support it. Don't whitewash." Like these are original characters, right? Like, okay.
Yeah.
I love you guys, but we get some trolls, and I apologize ahead of time. So
that was so weird.
That is so weird, right? Like, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm whitewashing my own characters.
How dare you,
bastard!
Oh
I know. I'm canceled. I'm canceled. I'm not even like on the main program, but I'm canceled.
Oh my goodness, you evil man. Okay, so let's start. I don't know why it shares automatically, but that's all right. We're gonna start talking a little bit about what's going, because there's so much DC news this week. There was so much, and I've talked about it. I did a solicitation video. I've talked about the death of Justice League, but I still don't I'm still at that place where I'm like, what? Okay, where are we going from here? So, Rocky, what do you think? Why do you think? Who do you think's going to be the one survivor?
Just to review, we know that Joshua Williamson in more than one interview has said there are 10 people that go off to fight the Dark Army at the end of the multiverse. And I'm assuming the Dark Army is related to the Gentry. And the 10 people that go are Superman, Batman, Bruce Wayne Batman, Diana Wonder Woman, John Stewart Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Black Canary, Hawkgirl, Martian Manhunter, Arthur Curry, Aquaman, and Zatanna. I know it's probably, I think it's an easy guess. I'm assuming Zatanna is going to be the one that survives.
Everybody's saying Zatanna.
I know. And frankly, it doesn't really matter who else it is. If it's somebody else, I would guess it's either going to be Martian Manhunter or maybe Hawkgirl. But I'm guessing it's actually going to be Zatanna. If for no other reason, and I could be 100% wrong, but I'm guessing that they want their bigger ticket items, their bigger ticket stars. And with great respect to Zatanna, I actually love Zatanna. I got a huge Zatanna collection, and hey, what's not to love about Zatanna, right? But I just have a feeling that I think you want to have maybe your top tier. I consider Zatanna to be not quite top tier, a little bit below, and I expect it's going to be the other Justice League members that are going to. I picture them arriving to at the end of the day to win the day, and I expect Zatanna's just going to come back and sort of give the warning, probably saying the warning in backwards or something. Who knows? But I think Zatanna is going to be the one that returns and sort of tells everyone that this is what's happened to the Justice League, and then of course we're going to have all these other people, all these other characters. The legacy characters step up to the plate, and I do think that I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but just a quick note. I do think this is 5G in another twisted form. I really do.
Yep.
I think this is like a alternative 5G. I think AT&T just got a little fed up. I think they discarded video and they discarded 5G. But let's face it, we've been getting bits and pieces of what was 5G for the last year and a half, and this is just sort of like 5G 1.5. Not even 2.0. So
Yeah.
anyways, that's my opinion on that.
Let me get this super chat real quick. I think the whole thing is going to be like Death Metal Doomsday Clock. There will be a point of divide before and after of the death of the Justice League. Yeah, I get that. I mean, Death Metal really could have been a point where they really restarted stuff. And I think they tried with Infinite Frontier, and I don't think enough of everybody was on board. Like, maybe it's an editorial issue. I don't know, but it felt like they were doing like, okay, we're going to start over this title, but Flash, Action Comics, Superman, these things are going to continue to go. But now we've got this, and I think Zatanna's a good answer. Why is Zatanna going, but not like John and Detective Chimp and everybody else that was just in that JLA story? I don't know what's going on here.
I don't want to hog the chat. Dr. Soup, Trevor, go ahead and comment.
Yeah, sorry, there was like Jerry Springer going on in your chat. So I don't know. Like, I'm just gonna stop modding for a second because I think that my hands on the keyboard are like making the crazies show up. But I'll let you go ahead, Trevor. Sorry, I was distracted.
That's all good. I was a little bit distracted too. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell is happening.
I don't know. We went from like the canceling of my yet to be popular publishing business and DC losing its ball. We're everywhere today. So I mean, I have refrained from reading the Justice League Incarnate and Bendis's Justice League. I'd like to say that it's because I have taste, so I don't quite know the context, like leading up to the event. So I don't really know what Justice Leaguer is going to survive. I mean, if DC is just going like full unabashed, like hyper saturated, because they're already super saturated, maybe they leave Batman alive. But I also think it's probably a little bit more of a buzz for a bunch of wannabe like comic book journalist sites to be like, Batman is dead, and then just forget that the rest of the Justice League is dead because Batman's dead.
Right.
But I don't quite know what's going to come out of it. Like Rocky said, I agree. I mean, DC has been like kind of rehashing and repuzzling the creative endeavors that were going to be 5G for the last 2 years. That's how we got the absolute shit stain called Future State. And now I think we're trying to come out of it.
It wasn't that bad.
It was pretty bad.
There were some that were pretty bad. You know what, though? That Swamp Thing one, that was so good.
Yeah, I mean, there are maybe 3 or 4 books that I could like admit were pretty good out of that run. I mean, I had the absolute. It's funny. You could probably say that like Future State killed my comic book reviewing career because I was reviewing them with Rocky and another pal of ours, Jace from the Comic Source, and I just remember getting so frustrated with DC. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not reviewing these books. I'm not giving them my headspace. I'd rather just go read good things. But when it comes out of what they're going to end up doing in the future, it's hard to say. I don't. Unfortunately, I don't quite trust Joshua Williamson as a writer anymore.
What?
So,
you're fired.
I'm
this
sorry.
Is Robert, everybody.
Hey.
What's up?
Hey, Robert.
Not much. Sorry, I had to comment with that. What?
Yeah. No, I mean, I haven't trusted Williamson as a writer for the last couple of years. So
why? What's been wrong with it? What's been wrong with it? Just asking.
I mean, I didn't know that was a question. No, I mean, like most of his Flash run was just like a derivative on a bunch of things that Jeff Johns has done in other spaces. It felt like he was trying to rehack the success that Jeff Johns was able to like weave together originally, and it just felt hyper derivative. His dialogue is horrible consistently. In terms of lining up his own plot points, they're often like really, really jagged and will like misrefer to themselves in the future, or they don't add up. Emotionally, I don't think he gets places with characters in a way that they've been developed. I think he uses shock points, which is like a writing term where he's just like, we're going to throw this really spicy moment in the middle of whatever, and we're going to tell you that it's impactful, but we're not actually going to make it impactful. So yeah, I mean, I could keep going on. I say this as somebody who really enjoyed the beginning of his Flash run. Like at the beginning of DC Rebirth, that was probably like one of the first 5 books I would pick up off of my huge stack at the time and read. I really enjoyed it. I liked his Justice League versus Suicide Squad. I don't have like a total like anti-Williamson bias. You can, if you go back a couple years ago, I vehemently went out on Twitter when I was enjoying his Flash run and his Justice League v Suicide Squad, and I was like, put this man on Justice League. Now, I was wrong, but yeah, I don't quite trust Williamson as a writer anymore. So my first instinct is just to think that he might go for the low hanging fruit at the end of this whole event. And his comments don't make me feel comfortable. He's like, well, we're going to do Death of Superman, which was kind of a mess, and make it bigger. So it's like, we're going to take one mess and blow it up. So I don't know.
That's for debate still, calling Death of Superman a mess as well. That's up for debate. A lot of people would argue that.
Yeah, I mean, it also like kind of like played a very big hand in killing the comic book industry, but
not intentionally. And in fact, the funny thing is, you got to remember about this. It was never meant to be a big event. In fact, it was meant to be like this was at a point where the Superman line, they were struggling just to make sure they got ad space. That's why they would have to do a bunch of events, because that guaranteed ad space, which would increase sales slightly. So they did that thinking, well, we can't do the wedding because of the Superman, Lois and Clark. So let's just kill them because they were so salty.
But also, if they didn't want it to be big, why did they print like 3 million copies?
That's after it blew up. All right, the first print run was not that. Sorry, I'm afraid that when they announced it, that's when everyone was like, "What the hell? Oh my god! And there was the demand. So many of that was for the demand. The later books, they overprinted like the Adventures of Superman number 500. They overprinted that one.
I was just referring to Superman 75, like the polybagged like super.
That was the demand people were making. You cannot blame the DC for all those comic book stores actually ordering that many. That was up to them, not DC saying, "Here, take them all."
So, anyways, Robert, who do you think will win? Sorry.
Like Rocky, I sing Zatanna. If for no other reason, and she has a get the hell out of Dodge free card was her magic.
Are you picking Zatanna too, Soup?
I agree, yeah.
What? You guys are all wrong. I hope you know that.
Then who else could do it? Who else can get out of there without a scratch if it's somebody that could kill Superman or Wonder Woman?
Well, I don't know yet, but I still am going. I'm still going with Wonder Woman. They just freaking killed her.
That's a good point.
She had to travel her way back through everything for almost a year to finally get back and deal with the Image Maker, and like, at least we got Shining Knight out of it. But like, she just died. It's been a year. Can you not kill her again?
I thought
have you also noticed that Zatanna's the only one we haven't seen the coffin for?
Yeah, that's true. Shut up.
Could also be that she doesn't have a logo like the other guys do, but I like that. I think part of that's like definitely PR.
Oh yeah.
But I honestly forgot where I was gonna go with that. I just saw somebody like being like, "Hey, I didn't like Joshua Williamson's Robin #1. Does that make me happy?" No, it doesn't particularly make me happy. I hope you like it. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean that you can.
His Robins have been really good, in my opinion.
I read the first issue. Didn't really like it, but I also, like, to be fair, like I don't put my my expectations or like my cynicism as a reader, like on anybody else. I also like I make comics now, so like I'm constantly studying these guys to try to pick up traits and techniques and tools and habits. So like
Ooh.
if I read something and um there I feel like there's nothing for me to pull out of it, I kind of get bummed out and I'm like, well, I don't like it. This isn't for
You're
me.
like,
So
I could totally do that better. God, why won't they? No, I'm just kidding.
I'm available.
I actually think you're a phenomenal writer. I'm just giving you shit.
thank you. I mean, DC, I'm available, and I love Robin. I love Damian Wayne. So,
I do. I just want to say a number of things about this death of the Justice League. First of all, the reason why I don't mind it. I'm not upset over it, but because it's been maybe done before, or it's the 30th anniversary of the death of Superman. To me, I really don't care about that. I don't care about it being the 30th anniversary of the death of Superman. I look at it from a storytelling point of view, and the reality is that with Bendis's Justice League, I've personally felt like we haven't had a Justice League comic anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So now, but having said that, now that's just me being a cynical bastard, okay? But now we've had a Justice League comic, but let me spell this out. Like, really, we've just now been getting Kal-El coming into his own with Action Comics with Philip Kennedy Johnson. Batman, we have Jace Fox already. So Bruce Wayne's already kind of disappeared anyway. He's in Europe. So him being off the playing field for 3 to 6 months, we're in the DC Omniverse. It's not been defined anyway. We keep getting stories. Continuity is wonky in the DC universe. So when I have Joshua Williamson or anybody at DC editorial or Mariv Javins or anybody or Danny Cherry when he doesn't decide to quit or get fired or whatever the hell happened there. I mean, really, what the hell's going on at DC right now? I don't really know. And so frankly, I look at Superman. He's gonna be replaced by John Kent for 3 or 4 months. He's kind of already replaced because we got Superman Son of Kal-El. We got Batman. We got Jace Fox replacing Batman. With Wonder Woman, I'm enjoying Newbie in the Amazons. We got Yara Flor. I mean, despite the cancellation of her series,
I will never forgive them.
Yeah, but she's still on the playing field though. She's still on the playing field with Trial of the Amazon, so she's not going anywhere. I think I've heard rumblings through different sources that Joelle Jones has had frustrations with editorial. I do think that a lot what's going on at DC, they're being taken over. AT&T is being taken over by Discovery. In terms of their book. So I do think that there's something going on behind the scenes and there's some scrambling going on. John Stewart, Green Lantern, him being taken off the playing field. So what? We got Hal Jordan, we got Kyle Rayner, we got Joe Mulleen, we got Teen Lantern, we got an entire Green Lantern Corps. Green Arrow and Black Canary. With all due respect to Green Arrow and Black Canary, I love Black Canary, but who cares? They're off the playing field. They weren't on the playing field, for God's sake. So we're not going to miss them. We got Green Arrow on Deep Impact with Aquaman. Well, who's buying that series? I'm reviewing it because I kind of like it's my job, but I mean, no one's buying it. Hawk Girl, we don't even have a Hawkman Hawk Girl series anyway, so she's kind of off the playing field anyway. Martian Manhunter, he's a backup in comics. People, no one's thinking about him. Arthur Curry, I've already talked about. Zatanna has been a backup feature in Justice League Dark with Bendis's Justice League, albeit the best part of the Justice League comic.
I was gonna say it's the best part of that book.
Sure. So, anyways, when you look at all those 10, and then you turn around and tell me that, oh my God, and we're going to be building up to the elimination. 9 of these characters are dead for like 6 months. I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay. All this is and Williamson even specifically stated it. He specifically stated that DC will be, some of the biggest characters will be taken off the field, and that this will allow the newer characters like John Kent and Yara Flor a chance to step into the spotlight a bit more. That is exactly what 5G was intended to do.
Wait, he said that? I missed that.
That's an exact quote. If you go to any of it's an exact quote. We'll give newer heroes like John Kent and Yara Flor a chance to step into the spotlight a bit more. He then goes on to mention specifically Jessica, and he talks about how the villains are going to react. So, frankly, we're going to have Yara Flor, John Kent, Jessica step up to the plate, and
Jessica Cruz. Okay, I missed this.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I'm inferring from the articles in the interviews that he gave.
Right.
So, I mean, this to me is not something that, the joke of this is that a lot of these major players have sort of been off the playing field kind of already anyway. So this isn't going to feel like an absence to me. if I'm brutally honest. So it's just going to feel like, business as usual for a DC that's trying to get their shit together and figure out their continuity.
So, actually, I think I have a better question with all of this. Is it time for another crisis? Like,
well, we're getting one whether we want one or not. It's coming in the summer. We know that.
Wasn't metal also supposed to be a crisis, like death metal or metal? Or
I mean,
right, it was. Yeah, it was originally called Death Crisis, I think, and then they called it death metal.
So have we got any? Maybe I've just not been paying attention, but have we got any official announcements? I haven't seen anything official besides rumor mongering, like Bleeding Cool or me going, "It's time."
Yeah. The death of the Justice League is the beginning of the third act. That's an exact quote from Williamson. It's the beginning of the third act. And I'm assuming he's using the same language as they talk about movies, about the third act being there's only 3 acts in a movie. So I'm assuming that this is the end game. We're moving into, not to confuse with Avengers, but we're moving into the final act, the final narrative, beginning with the death of Justice League. And that will lead into the final, I guess the summer crisis. I don't want to confuse
we're going into the final crisis.
Yeah, and I think that what's going to result is I'm not really sure, because I got to tell you, like, when you think about it, DC is in a very precarious spot, and I got to wonder what DC editorial thinks, if they even pay attention to social media, because all of us here in this chat. And all of us here on this stream, we all know that whether we like it or not, I mean, there's a comic book culture war that's still with us. And the narrative about, oh my God, the death of DC, the sales are terrible and everything else, and the sales are down. They are. And you got to wonder, what is the end game editorially for DC? What do they want? Who do they want? John Kent to be the Superman? Do they even want Kal-El to be the head anymore? Do they want Diana to be the head of the Amazons? What do they want? Like, because bear in mind, there's a number of things here that are interesting. Who do they want to be their primary Green Lantern? Joe Mullein, John Stewart, who? Hal Jordan, even the Flash. Please note the absence of the Flash in the dead. Flash Barry Allen has already taken off the playing field. Wally West is not amongst the dead. I got an interview coming up. Jason and I did an interview with Jeremy Adams. I'm gonna post it on my channel on Thursday. Jeremy Adams gives some spoilers and just a couple of hints. When we asked Jeremy Adams about death of the Justice League, his comment was, he jokingly said, "I didn't see Wally in that in those pictures." So it's, I mean, obviously Wally West does not die. So Wally West is still on the playing field. And so, it's interesting. And, again, I think as those of us who love DC Comics, as we're talking here, I mean, I think there's a lot to look forward to. At the same time, I have some level of frustration, as I'm sure we all do, because we know the continuity's been a little wonky and we're trying to make sense of it.
See, my thing here is I'm getting frustrated with the continuity. My brain needs to know what's going on. My brain needs to make sense of it. And that's my own problem. I get that. But when I read every book except for maybe 2 that are supposed to be in continuity, I should have a general grasp of what's going on. Yeah. But it feels very much so like Justice League Incarnate, Infinite Frontier are not running in the main continuity. I know they are, but it feels like they're running alongside everything.
Yeah.
And there's no interaction. Like we've got Thomas, right?
Thomas Wayne.
Why isn't he like trying to get, didn't he just in Tom King's run, wasn't he just the villain?
They do acknowledge that. They do actually acknowledge that during it all, especially after Dr. Multiverse shows them all the other worlds where that Brain was saying, "Oh yeah, you wanted Bruce not to be Batman? Newsflash, he's Batman across the multiverse," where he finally realized, "Oh crap, what was I doing?"
And apparently the Jeff Johns Flashpoint project that's coming up, where he co-writes with Jeremy Adams and Tim Sheridan, and Jeremy Adams went out of his way not to spoil anything, so he never gave it a thought in our interview with him.
Oh, I've tried asking him to come on, and now he's at a point where he says can't do interviews now going forward because of that project.
Yeah, but he did make it very clear that it's a very emotional story, and I think it is meant to bridge the gap between the Flashpoint Batman at the end of Flashpoint, and then of course we have the sort of Flashpoint Batman villain with Tom King's Batman. It's sort of explaining the in between, I think, in terms of where how he got where he's at, I think,
Mhm.
maybe. And because I can't believe that they're actually trying to put lipstick on the pig of Tom King's Batman, but there you have it. But if anybody can pull it off, it's Jeff Johns, and
Oh yeah.
with
Mhm.
Jeremy Adams, and I mean maybe to a lesser extent Tim Sheridan. I think it's going to be. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that, you know, I think that at the end of this, I'm really hoping that DC is going through some growing pains, and that they're going to grow out of it, and into the Discovery takeover, because I think Discovery is going to come in and lay more people off. For some reason, I think Danny, Dan Cherry being, either quitting or laid off or whatever the hell he was. I think he left to go with Kanye West or whatever. But I think that there's some editorial or some corporate shuffling that's going to be going on once Discovery comes in, and I'm really hoping that maybe they get more of a foothold and a little bit more of an appreciation that comic books are more than just a foothold into like intellectual property farming, and maybe start taking the storylines a little bit more seriously. Not that
Yeah.
they're that bad, but as we've all indicated, we're all a little frustrated with the continuity wonkiness.
Well, I think that the big problem that I've found, and why I've kind of steadily backed further and further away from DC and even Marvel as like superhero comics, are because at the core of all of these stories, there needs to be an emotionality to them. And they're getting so big and so crazy and trying to capitalize on like the overwhelming potential of comic books to be able to tell these wild, cosmic, like out of this world stories. But they forget that like at the end of the day, you're dealing with characters who underneath those masks are people, and all of these big cosmic happenings need to have a sense of humanity and personality behind them. That's the only way we care, right? You look at something like Star Wars. We don't care about the Empire. We don't give a shit in those original movies that they're going through and they're basically like destroying planets that are of threats to them. We only care because we're seeing it through the lens of Luke, Han, and Leia. That's why we care. And even despite the fact that that movie isn't super overt about those type of very personal human themes that you're dealing with, they work because we're seeing it through those characters' eyes. Whereas in comics, especially in these grander projects where you have casts of characters that are like 25, 30 heads deep, it's hard to manage that, and it's hard to make those moments impactful beyond what's physically happening. So, for my money, like I think DC needs to kind of step back and make these big events, I mean, either slow down completely or slow down to a stop,
Right.
or make them more about something. Make them about these characters. What are the ramifications to the characters? Why do I care? Right? Because I don't care if Darkseid is blowing up Earth. I care about Darkseid blowing up Earth because it affects all of these characters that I love, and I want to see how it affects these characters that I love, why it affects these characters that I love. So yeah, I mean, we need to go down to the character, man. Like, I know it's super controversial or divisive, but for me, Identity Crisis works because it's about characters. You
Right.
feel heartbroken about the Dibneys, despite the fact that, mind you, I had never ever read a comic book with the Dibneys in it before I read Identity Crisis for the first time,
Mhm.
and I still cared because from the jump they made it clear what those characters represented to the rest of the world and characters that I do actually care about, so that by the time we get to the points where Brad Meltzer and Rags Morales are unveiling what's happened to Sue and Ralph Dibney, it hurts. It's impactful. And I think that's a step that, despite somebody's disagreement with how that was handled, that's a step that I think is necessary in these larger events to make them have any real lasting impact.
So I know every once in a while I have a couple people that work at DC that listen. Hire this man. This is what we've been asking for a very long time, is a connection. This is why characters like, in my opinion, Naomi doesn't necessarily work. I don't think it was written badly. I don't think the art is bad. but I don't have a reason to care for her at her core. There are certain characters that I absolutely love. Their personality, everything. Like Selena Kyle and definitely Harley Quinn are two characters that I absolutely love because I care about them as characters. So when I see something happen or some sort of ramifications, even if it is of their own actions, that affects me while I'm reading. There have been I've talked about Radio Apocalypse by Ram V. That book, that first book, I didn't know those characters. They were brand new to me, but I was bawling by the end because of what he was able to make me, how he was able to make me emotionally connect. And I'm not kidding. When I say crying, it was like a 2-year-old child. Like, if you're able to do that and bring back those emotional connections, then you're golden. I didn't necessarily, yeah, I get what you mean about identity crisis. That actually brings up something I wanted to talk about, but has anyone else noticed a weird trope, I would say, more for Comic Boom and Robert, that Mariko Tamaki, very much so, and I like her writing. Her detective comics is phenomenal. But she relies on violence against women a lot in her plot lines.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I mean,
Why?
how did she start her Detective Comics run? That one of Bruce's new neighbors getting offed right away, and then that led to her father wanting to, revenge on Bruce.
And then in this last Detective Comics, all the hints about I mean, am I the only one seeing the hints about Anna Vol'jin being raped?
Yeah.
I just like I really want to like her, and I've rooted for her since the beginning, but like
Once you realize it,
that can't always be your go-to because you want all different types of readers.
yep.
You're going to have victims of that step back or people that don't want to. And rape can work in comics. I'm not saying that. And we've had this conversation way too much lately with the Superman stuff. But if that's your go-to thing to get people emotionally invested, you need another trope, I guess. You need
Agree.
something to add in there because if that's constantly thrown in your face, I'm going to step back.
And I gotta say, with what they're doing with the tower, Arkham Tower, and everything in general, I'm not liking where it's going. It feels like it's hitting the politics stuff a bit more on the nose than I saw it.
Huh?
With the tower, just how they're saying like, oh, they're drugging people up and everything. It's just like that's where it seems where they're heading anyway.
I mean, that's welcome to healthcare. Like,
Well,
unfortunately, that's kind of how it is. Like, oh, you're telling me that something silly like smoking a bowl calms you down? Just kidding. I'm gonna give you Xanax. That's the healthcare professionals.
True.
So I don't actually see that as a huge problem. Obviously, what is it, Dr. Ocean? Obviously, he's not doing something right. That's very clear.
Yeah,
that is true.
Well, first of all, let me just I am privy to future issues, and let me just tell you, Robert, that there's no politics. There's a very good well, in the comics that you've read so far, it's not my place to tell you what you want to read into the comic. So if you read politics, that's fine. I don't want to step on your toes there.
No problem. No problem.
I will say this though, that there's a very actually interesting explanation as to what's going on, and it's I think it. Whether or not you will like it, I don't know, but I think it's interesting. But it makes a lot of sense. It explains everything.
All right.
There's another force at play. It's got nothing to do with drugs. And Nightwing's cynicism in the upcoming issues here about why suddenly. I mean, the inmates have always been taking drugs, and now all of a sudden the drugs are working. And the drugs aren't any different.
That's what they were saying. All right.
Something else is going on here. And if you're really, really careful with how you read it, you could probably figure out what other forces at play. And but just to comment on Tristan, your comment about Marika Tamaki's about sort of like playing maybe the trope of the women as the victim card and rape as the underscoring, as the underlying trauma and everything. I think I didn't. I'm kind of. It's interesting that you say that because because I know that you're. I'm always interested in your point of view on this because just because you come at it from a different perspective. But it's funny I never actually saw it that hasn't been bothering me only because I think, and maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but I think sexual trauma and rape and trauma for a lot of women, especially the women who end up being villains in Gotham City. I think that is maybe it's a little tropey, but I do think that it underscores a lot. Young women that are often abused. I mean, often there's a sexual element to it,
Right.
albeit admittedly you definitely see it more in the female characters than the male characters. Maybe there's some fridging going on there, or to use
Mhm.
that wonderful term. Thank you, Gil Simone. uh, but it's funny. I actually think that it's going to be really interesting to hear Robert and Tristan and Dark Knight, Trevor, your opinion when this storyline on Shadow of the Bat ends, because I do think it's not quite there's going to be there's been some serious misdirection that's been going on,
All right.
and when it's revealed what's been going on, I think it's actually kind of interesting. And I think maybe it's a little bit, you might even consider a tropey too, but I actually, I like what Marika Tamaki has been doing
Mhm.
because she's thinking outside the box a little bit. And I thought this was going to be another Arkham Tower, another inmates ruling the inmates, too many chefs in the kitchen, the inmates ruling the asylum. Oh, we've seen this story before. Well, I don't know if we've quite seen this kind of story before. And
Fair
even
enough.
keep in mind how the Huntress is acting. The
Oh
Huntress is
yeah,
on
that's
Yeah,
the
I
crazy.
Huntress
noticed
is
that
drugged.
too.
That
Bear in
was
mind,
weird. That
the
was
Huntress
weird.
is drugged, but why does the Huntress want to stay? She's not that much drugged. Why does she want to stay? What's keeping her
True.
there? Why is she, in the latest issue, she arguably tripped off an alarm herself on purpose to get Kane out of there. Something else is going on here. And I mean, I personally like it, but I've been enjoying Marika Tamaki. And you know what? I'll be full disclosure. I haven't been a fan of Marika Tamaki up until her Batman run. In fact, probably most of what I like about Marika Tamaki can be summed up in her Batman run.
Yeah.
Everything else she's written, I haven't been a huge fan of. But I got to tell you, I appreciate the effort that she's making in delving into Batman lore, bringing in Batman mythology, thinking outside the box a little bit, and more of this. I'll be interested. I don't want to spoil anything, but I really think that people are either going to hate it or love it. I've got mixed feelings about what the misdirection is, but it'll be interesting to see what people think.
Okay, now you've piqued my interest.
Yeah, that gives me hope, because at the end of this last one I was just like like another yeah, another inmates running the asylum type thing, right? And that actually gives me hope. I like Mariko Tamaki, and I think she really came into her own in this Detective Comics run. But I was just like, at the end of this last one with the Anna Volgen and that one guy trying to take her, and then the fake, I forget her name. It was Kate Kane, but it was her doctor trying to take her. Like, obviously
Oh
they were
yeah.
hinting at something, some sort of trauma, and I was just like, all right, Mariko, I get it. That's your stick. But give us something else. So I'm glad to hear something else is soon coming, because I've been rooting for her. I think she does a good job. I really
bear in
do.
mind, Tristan, that a lot of the people that are working at Arkham Tower right now are actually, I mean, the Bat family puts together a lot of the workers working at Arkham Tower right now are former colleagues and workers who used to work for the Penguin and other Gotham villains.
Party crashers or whatever.
Yeah, the party crashers.
Yeah.
It's one of the party crashers is the one trying to sexually take advantage of Anna Volshin. But Anna Volshin is never actually, I don't think she's ever actually sexually assaulted or raped
Right.
in the story. But although you could imply that. I mean, hey, if you can imply that Superman is sodomized by an Eastern dictator, you can probably imply that maybe Anna Volshin is being sexually manipulated in Arkham Tower. But
I'm not even kidding. I get that because I cover so much DC stuff. I get that comment at least once or twice a day about Superman. I'm like, yes, everybody caught on to it 9 months late because nobody that actually complains about this stuff too badly are reading comics. So yeah, 9 months later, we're all still talking about it. Well,
Hey,
almost a year now.
can I give my own defense about all the stuff that was Williamson's stuff? Why I feel this is different compared to what's come before? It's that after the events of Death Metal, whenever you really think about it, up until this point, throughout all of DC's continuity, the multiverse, most of the people never knew each other existed. It was always like an enclosed thing and everything. And then after Death Metal, everyone's aware of the multiverse. This is something that was never touched on, which is what Infinite Frontier first started setting up, where you revealed, oh, some of the people like Captain Atom were Captain Atom from another world wanting to make a life on the main Earth, DC Earth and everything. And where we're also finding out the downside of what Death Metal did, like was Darkseid. He's stronger than he's ever been. And now the whole point of Justice League Incarnate is we're finding out about all this stuff that's happening, yeah, like you said, parallel to what's going on in the DC universe. And I'm pretty sure Death of the Justice League is when everything comes to a head. And part of the reason why it's a different league than what Bendis is doing is that where I think it was meant to assume some time has skipped since the end of Bendis' league and the end of so many of the other stuff going on, that this is the point then where it happens, and then they die, go forward into what Williamson is doing and see where it goes from there, and eventually things will catch up. That's how I feel, and it's been done before, done to mixed success, but I feel like Williamson, he's definitely subscribed to a lot of the school of thought that Jeff Johns has. Is he as good as Jeff Johns? Wouldn't say that, but he's better than others, I think. And I think that's what he's trying to do. Is he getting too big for his britches with it? I think maybe he is in many regards, but that's because he's been given so much to work with that he doesn't know how to work with it very well. So that's probably why he feels like, I mean, I'm one of those who thinks the Death of the Justice League was part of the plan from the beginning, you know, of all this. Like he said, it started from Infinite Frontier. I think this has been the plan since last year. It just so happens to be, you know, like, I mean, that explains why Bendis' Super and Justice League stuff is wrapping up so quickly. I think they always were meant to do it on 75. Sorry, I went all over the map at that last bit.
Oh no, you're totally fine. I was telling Derek he was wrong. Marvel is not superior. Just had to get that out of the way. But yeah, I like Williamson. I think he's a good company man. I think he does a good job. I'm looking forward to I'm really looking forward to, what is it, the World War III or War on World 3?
Yeah.
Suicide Squad has been so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, War on Earth 3. Yeah, it's that's one of the things coming out of Future State that has been probably one of the more potentially interesting aspects or interesting storylines because of Suicide Squad under Robbie Thompson it's been a lot of fun. Even with Ambush Bug breaking the fourth wall, that's been a little bit divisive, but I think for the most part, people are having fun with it. And, you know, it's involved. Suicide Squad has crossed over with Teen Titans Academy. It's crossed over with Jeremy Adams' The Flash. And, you know, we know that ultimately Amanda Waller her ultimate plan, at least in Future State, was to create a Superman for Earth 3. And ultimately they were going to take out the crime syndicate. What, you know, as a reader and as somebody who's aware of what's going on a little bit behind the scenes, I know that Andy Schmidt's 6-issue crime syndicate, he wasn't informed of any of the plans of DC, that his crime syndicate series was completely disconnected. It's not being looked at or respected or in any way, shape, or form being looked at as a foundation for the crime syndicate in this series. No one's communicated with him about anything.
Oh my goodness.
He has no idea. I mean, we interviewed Andy Schmidt, and there's a number of things that he loves it. He wants to, you know, he'd love to write more of the crime syndicate. He literally has a 150 character Bible that he created for it.
That's so cool. Serious.
Yeah, it is. It's awesome. He's passionate about it, just like Jeremy Adams is passionate about the Flash. Jeremy Adams said in an interview that he's one of the reasons why he's introduced Maxine Baker, who is Buddy Baker, Animal Man's daughter, is that he wants to write more for DC. He wants he's creating all these ideas because he's blunt about it. He wants them to take notice because he's only writing Flash. People are loving Jeremy Adams' Flash. And the fact is, when people are bad mouthing DC, guess what? In most chats, they're not bad mouthing Jeremy Adams. Jeremy Adams is
Right.
one of the few writers out there that people aren't universally bashing. I mean, it's not even 50-50. And even Jeremy Adams jokes about it. He used to write for Supernatural. I mean, he said when he wrote for Supernatural, there was always somebody that wanted him dead because of what he did with the characters and what have you. But he says he loves his experience on the Flash because everybody loves what he's doing, and it's because he's passionate. He's putting it out there. And I got to say, as a fan, it bothers me that Jeremy Adams, and this is me talking, not Jeremy Adams, but it's clear from the way he was answering our questions that he's been asking a lot of questions of editorial and he's not getting a response. He doesn't even know what the sales are. I mean, he's hopeful, he's optimistic. He was all optimism, as you would expect him to be. He is selling the Flash and he's doing a good job. But there's a strong sense here that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing at DC.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of communication. And that's what kind of bothers me here about this. And Joshua Williamson, I asked him what the top three comics he's reading. He says when he's reading about DC, he mentioned Marvel, Sardasky, Daredevil. He mentioned a lot of the stuff and Thor and Venom. But when it comes to DC, he's reading Williamson stuff. Why is he reading Joshua Williamson? Because he said Joshua Williamson is the captain of the ship at DC.
Yeah.
So he's reading that. So he's staying up on that. And and those of us who've been reading Flash know that Jeremy Adams has been incorporating elements that are clearly leading in, like Eclipso, that are clearly leading into the Great Darkness and that are linked. But believe it or not, that's not a lot of that is just Jeremy Adams taking this is me talking now. I think he's taking a guess. These are leaps of faith on his part because he wants to get noticed. And I question the degree to which editorial has really taken notice of Jeremy Adams. I hope that they realize that, this guy deserves some more attention. He wants to get more titles. He wants to get more love, and I hope he gets it. And I guess we'll have to wait and see. But anyways, it's
I was happy to see he was writing with Jeff Johns.
That
at
should
least
help him
gives me
big
some
time.
sort of hope. And I would love to see him do a Flash family like we get with the Bat family. Like the way he does Giant Irie, oh my God, melts your heart every single panel. And it's so good. And he's so passionate. I really hope to see him continue with DC. I can't, there's not been a bad issue yet. There hasn't. And I know he did say, when I talked to him about bringing Gold Beetle back, I'm like, yes, I love that character. She's so weird. Like, she's so fun and upbeat. I can't wait to have that back. But I don't know. Like, there are certain things that I just kind of am at the point where I'm like, I kind of can't wait for this all to be over so we can get to this big moment, this big grandiose moment and find out what's going to happen after. Because how is this going to be a relaunch? Are they going to do a relaunch? It's such a mess. And then did you guys see the announcement? I'm so excited. Did you guys see the announcement for James Tynion is back writing Nightmare Country for Sandman?
Yeah.
Oh, the
good news.
Corinthian.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like that's the best comic news of the year. I was so excited. Like, not just Tynion. Tynion's a fantastic writer. But to have something back, the last Sandman story that we got, was it G. Willow Wilson, I want to say?
Yeah. The Dreaming, the Waking Hours.
Yeah, it wasn't awful, but I know it was good. Okay, it was mediocre. It wasn't anything that I would like sit here and put in my top books of the week or anything like that. But it wasn't something I'd drop either. I did at one point and then I picked it back up. The problem is when you make an announcement like that, why is it just me or does nobody talk about the good? You know what I mean? Like, that's a huge thing. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just love Sandman.
I think it's also partly like, despite this incredible critical and sales success of Sandman, it's oddly enough still kind of a niche space in comics, which is already a niche industry. So unfortunately, if it's not like big superhero stuff, unfortunately, it's just not going to get the same amount of press. Fortunately, because of all of the moving and shaking that James Tynion has has brought, you know, throughout particularly the last 2 years and the move to Substack, you know, it got the Hollywood Reporter's attention, which, like, you know, be still like my beating nerdy heart that we got like a Sandman book on the Hollywood Reporter. That's fantastic.
Right.
And I'm like you, I'm excited. I mean, I didn't like Tynan's Batman, but man, he's been absolutely murdering it with his indie books and with The Nice House on the Lake. So seeing him get to play in a space like Sandman that I know is highly beloved by him, and with a character like the Corinthian who, despite
Oh, it's so cool.
yeah, like despite not getting, despite never, you know, the Corinthian's always been a fan favorite character, despite not getting like a lot of quote unquote screen time. So it's really cool that we're going to have this opportunity to play in that space because it's so big and broad. Now, do I think it's going to sell crazy numbers? Probably not. You know, I'd love it to, but I think part of it is also like the market. The market likes superhero stuff,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
that's really what the industry was founded on. So, I mean, it's great that it's happening, and I wish we had more of it. I think there's another big problem too when it comes to these event comics, and the issue editorially is that, like, there are a lot of writers whose stories get completely hampered because they then have to like curtail whatever they're doing to lead into somebody else's big event that's
Oh,
likely
yeah.
inevitably going to be a mess anyways. But then, like, you know, we're sort of truncating somebody else's story in order to tell another big one, which is inherently super problematic. You know, there's nothing more frustrating than, like, I remember I was reading Peter Tomasi's Detective Comics run, and then we had to curb everything into Year of the Villain, and everything felt like it was making a pretty drastic left turn in order to like point all the fingers towards this other thing, like a magnet, you know, pulling it off its track. And you know, it's I think that's like why comics can't sustain relatively high sales numbers. Like, they're the peaks and the valleys of comic book sales are incredible because we're always capitalizing on the spectacle of the stories and the speculation of who's going to die, who's going to appear. It's not sustainable. Like, in my mind, what I think we should do is bring down the line wide events and do smaller crossover events in comics where you get to see, you know, a sort of large overarching issue in Gotham where the Bat family links up, a large overarching issue where the Flash family meets up, maybe having, you know, 2 or 3 different characters storylines kind of lead to one another, because you can still make it big and grand and take advantage of that history and that continuity of comic book events without making it so unmanageable. And then you will have the time to, you know, just going back to what I had said a little bit earlier, to make these emotional stories that matter to the characters and still have these big cataclysmic, you know, quote unquote life-changing events for these characters.
It's interesting that you say that, Trevor, because I wonder if part of me, and this is perhaps some with some degree of irony, the there we do have, I think DC maybe is trying to do that with Trial of the Amazons, which is really only I think Trial of the Amazons is 2 central issues, and then there's middle issues in between, and then War for Earth 3 is actually just 2 issues with crossovers with the Flash and I think Suicide Squad. And
Mhm.
so the events, the Trial of the Amazons is an event, it's a mini event. The War for Earth 3 is a mini event, and they're
Mhm.
only 5 or 6 issues long. They're not long. It's actually one of the things that I like about DC is that they're not dragging these storylines out. And so that, of course, the big question is that is the story going to be good? Is it going to be a character driven story? And all your other comments, which I 100% agree with. But
Mm.
I do think that DC is at least getting right that at least they're I like the idea that the DC right now is they're doing they have Aquaman coming out now. Maybe it'll be maybe these will be shitty storylines, okay? But at least in theory, I like how they're at least structuring it. You know,
Right.
story wise, that might be another issue entirely. We can talk about that, but Aquaman might only be 5 or 6 issues. I like that, short, done in one. You know, and
Mm.
even Shadow, even Shadow of the Bat, the Arkham Tower. It's on a weekly basis. It's done in 12 issues. You know, again, 3 months is done.
Mm.
And, Trial of the Amazons, War for Earth 3. I like the fact that we're getting these series of mini events that you can sort of, if you live in the world of the Flash and Suicide Squad and Teen Titans Academy, you can kind of enjoy your own little world. If you love the Amazons, you can live in Wonder Girl and Wonder Woman and Nubia and the Amazons. So I kind of like what DC is doing. It on the surface, it seems like they have a plan, and yet when you get into the weeds, sometimes all of us are saying, "Well, the continuity is a little bit wonky." So, I really do think that in some ways they're on the right track, but yet I think editorially, I really do think editorially, I think there's a couple of editors that are kind of missing the mark here. Because if the editors could have said to some of these writers who maybe aren't aware of what's going on in the bigger picture, a lot of this continuity wonkiness could have been solved by a tweak of dialogue here, a tweak of dialogue there. These things are not insurmountable, but and so when we readers who are passionate about this, when we notice these small little mistakes, and then we argue about them in these live streams, it's so avoidable if an editor was just more on the ball. But it's almost as if the editors don't really kind of give a shit because they got their eye on a larger career path, as opposed to worrying about what's going on in issue blank of Wonder Woman. And it's kind of frustrating.
I think a lot of that is due to the fact that editorial, they are so short staffed. That's probably explained a lot of continuity issues as well. They are just so down to the bare minimum that now they haven't reached Marvel's level of apathy when it comes to everything. Thank God. Where at least they're putting a bit more of an effort by comparison. But it just feels like they are so struggling that they're not catching stuff, they're not seeing stuff, and that probably explains why they're also throwing more titles, because they need it just to keep themselves afloat so they don't get their necks on the chopping block, so to speak.
There's this like weird Discord about Super Sons in the chat being a top tier book. It didn't sell well. That's why it was
It did not
canceled.
sell. Yeah, it didn't sell well, and even the minis. Because I remember people kept saying, "I'm not buying it out of protest because of what's done to John."
It was
even
good.
Though it's like, oh yeah, but even though
It
it's
was
like
phenomenal.
Yeah, but it's like, guys, if you're going to not buy it out of protest, you realize then that's just going to tell DC, well, older John is selling better than kid John. We might as well keep him as an adult, as an older kid. Then it's just like they notice, but they feel like protesting, and everything. The books that if they bought more, it would do a lot better. If they had done that, it would have showed DC, hey, more people want Kid John back. Nope, they just chose instead, we're just going to be sticks and muds and not buy it even if it is good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like two sides to the fence, right? Fans want something, but also creatively, sometimes people don't know what they want until they have it or until they've lost it. So it's hard to be able to cater those types of choices. I was disappointed when they aged up John Kent.
Mm-hmm.
How do you de-age him and have it like make sense and fall into the continuity and have it matter?
Exactly.
And not just do it to do it. And just kind of tagging back into what Rock was saying about like these mini events. The thing is like how much consequence will come out of these mini events if we know that we're building to something bigger and larger that's ultimately going to kind of like curtail everything else into it. Like sometimes it feels like in terms of the continuity that the smaller stories don't matter as much because eventually something's going to get wiped out by something bigger and larger. And whether that is the intent of that bigger, larger story, or it's just people not paying enough attention to realize the consequences of something so grand, I don't know. I think like getting rid of these crazy, wild, like line-wide events for a while, and maybe using those smaller crossovers as ways to pull people into other books is going to be a great way to tell like cohesive stories that also have that impact, but are also going to be a lot easier to manage because admittedly, like despite my disagreements with a lot of the choices that DC editorial has made in the last 2 or 3 years, like being a comic book editor is such a thankless job. And the tough thing is that most readers have no fucking clue what editors actually do on comics. So they'll blame them needlessly, not having any idea what the actual responsibilities of an editor are, which by the way, change from company to company, change based on the hierarchy of your editorial position. The editors, I don't think are personally addicted to these big stories. These massive corporations that own these intellectual properties they want the press. They want Hollywood Reporter to write a story about how the Justice League is dying or whatever. It's not just about the editors. They do have people to answer to. I think the argument could be made or that you could have qualms with them about the way they're handling these events, but
Yeah.
ultimately that's not always their fault. And Rocky knows I've been a major critic of DC editorial over the last 2 years, but there comes a point where you do have to give them a little bit of slack and be cognizant of the fact that they do have people to answer to. And ultimately, unfortunately, the comic book market is so niche and the market is so difficult to sustain that these businesses are thinking more about the sales than they are about the creative endeavors of the
Yeah,
creators.
unfortunately.
And so, it's a tough shake. Ultimately, though, like if I had it my way, which I'll never get because I'm not allowed to have nice things, we would scale down these events and just focus on the characters. Because ultimately, if you can build an audience that loves a character, you will build return sales. Like I brought up the instance of Sandman every single time. When Sandman, was in the middle of its run, it was outselling Batman and Superman. This no-name pale character that was created by Neil Gaiman, this mythology, was outselling DC's biggest icons in a period, mind you, like in the late 80s, early 90s, where everybody like was shoving superheroes down their own throats. Like people couldn't get enough of superheroes, so much so that Image Comics was successfully able to outpace Marvel and DC with characters that were derivative of Marvel and DC. So it says something about building your own centralized mythology around characters and making people care about them. Will you get the immediate sales spike from the jump? No.
No.
It's not going to happen. But you can build sustained business and
Yes.
maintain quality storytelling.
Oh yeah, and I think that applies to even the crowdfunding books as well. I think there's some of them who rely on spectacle over everything and not actual good storytelling. They just go on to like, ooh, look at the cool art, look at the big titties and all that. I'm not saying all. I'm just saying there are some out there that are like that. And then it's like, oh, they're doing great in the short term, but eventually in the long run, it's going to peter out. They just don't want to admit it, or they don't realize it at all. Again, some,
Well, I
not
mean,
all. There's plenty of out there that are doing great.
well, it's not just a crowdfunding thing. Like it's an
Oh
industry
yeah,
thing. Unfortunately, like the industry is sustained off of sales spikes based on spectacle. Batman 50 sold gangbusters because we were promised a wedding. The Death of the Just League is going to sell gangbusters because it's controversial. It's just going to happen. I mean, we see sales spikes based on Peach Momoko covers or Inkyukuli covers, and while they're beautiful works of art, you would think people would be focused on the story. Like just thinking back to my experience, I would be infinitely more successful if I used my pool of talent that I work with and put out 10 variant covers to my book and had a naughty and nice version of every cover. But I don't, like, fully acknowledging that that's what the market wants. That's what people are buying, unfortunately. So I don't think we're going to see any real change unless the market votes with their dollar and begins to curb back on some of that spectacle and put it a little bit more to the use of these smaller character-based stories. Like, we're in a world where like for example, Vertigo, who had its cult following, it doesn't exist anymore because
yeah,
people care more about the spectacle than they do about the actual storytelling on a larger scheme, right? Like I'm not going to generalize everybody, but it also pulls an intrigue because these bigger events, like you could have somebody that hasn't read a comic book in 10 to 15 years, 20 years. They see the Death of the Justice League. They're like, oh, like this is my time to pop back in. This is crazy.
Right.
And then like they fleet back out as soon as it's over because the spectacle is done. And eventually those stories that are so spectacle fueled aren't quality stories that people can then latch back onto and pick back up with. Like, despite my criticisms of guys like Tom King, I think it's brilliant what he's doing now with his career. That he's going out and he's like, you know what? My staples are the Mr. Miracles and the Visions, in my career.
Yep.
So what am I going to do? I'm going to go tell this cool little Supergirl story. I'm going to go tell this Human Target story. Like that's what I want to see. I want to see these creators who I know are incredibly talented, who I know can tell stories that matter and gut check me and make me cry or make me shit myself.
You
Those are
poor
the stories,
thing. What are you reading?
honestly, probably more than I should. But like, that's what I want. And I unfortunately, like I openly acknowledge like I am not the rest of the market. Like I am the niche within the niche within the niche, unfortunately. So, we'll see, because these bigger publishers, and I mean the comic book industry, any business is going to be focused on bringing in the money. And until the market says no with their dollar to these larger events, then we're going to keep getting them. And that continuity is going to keep getting wilder and crazier. And it's going to necessitate a crisis more and more frequently, which I don't think is necessary. It's very rare that I've read a large scale comic book event that I actually thought was cohesive and mattered. Because they usually don't.
Yeah. Hey, someone brought up one thing in the chat that, about with Superman and the American way and all that stuff, and I got to ask, Superman and Lois, what, and the fact that everyone's getting so outraged about what's been going on, how he's more focusing on the world than America. Isn't that what he's always done?
I mean, yeah, but like that's like culture war shit. It's like, I don't know. It's bootlicking bullshit to me.
I was hoping Sid was going to say.
Yeah, I thought people were liking Superman and Lois. What's happened now?
Oh,
they turned on it?
Yep, with season 2, since they saw the trailer where you have an American soldier saying you should, help America, and he said, I gave that promise to the world long ago. They're thinking, he's anti-American and all that stuff. When it's like, no, he's saying, yes, he's an American citizen, but he focuses on helping the entire world. He's not going to just promise to only help America. But unfortunately, with the first episode of season 2, people are saying, America's the villain.
It's very interesting about the current comic book culture controversies. It's funny. It's okay. It's okay if the Justice League, deals with an intergalactic threat, but God forbid they deal with merely an international threat.
Right.
And they cross the territorial boundaries of another nation. All of a sudden, some idiot in southern United States has a conniption or has a geekasm over the fact that, oh my God, Superman is impinging on the rights of another country. It's like, how could he do that? That's not American. It's like, read a book. I don't know, like, educate yourself. Like, I get really tired of this horse shit, like the hypocrisy and the nonsense of it. It's same thing. It's the same thing with Captain America too. I mean, Captain America, last time I checked, I don't think he was an idiot. But if you're going to continue to look at these characters like it's still 1945, well, then maybe take a long, hard look in the mirror. I don't know, get educated, maybe get some therapy. I mean, because I just don't. Like, I mean, it's really, it's nonsensical. And, we've, well, I mean, Nerdette, you and I have been involved. I mean, we could debate anyone. But it's like, I got no problem doing it, but, because I can certainly respect someone and debate them in the whole 9 yards and still think like, good Lord, like, maybe step back and just like realize that these characters, they're different. Like, even now with the Justice League dying, bear in mind that for the next 6 months, is it really the end of the world that we're going to get a new legacy John Kent Superman, Yara Flora Wonder Girl, Jessica Cruz Green Lantern, Jackson Hyde, Jace Fox's Batman? We're going to probably get Black Adam, maybe Naomi, Wally West is the Flash, Hal Jordan is Green Lantern. We still have Robin on the playing field, Supergirl, Black Lightning, Mira, Cyborg, and the Teen Titans. We got an entire universe of extraordinary characters to play with. Who the hell says the DC universe is just the big 7 or the big 8 or the big 9?
Exactly.
I mean, come on. And
it's so funny because we get those people saying, we want to see the side characters. And then they're like, okay, we're going to show you the side characters. And they're like, no, we don't want the side characters. I mean, it's like, what do you want? It's enough is never enough. And I think it's funny that it comes down a lot like to the culture war stuff, but like Superman and Lois is generally a good show. If they struggle, like from what I've seen, he's struggling with his nationalism. So doesn't everybody at one point in their life?
Yeah.
You grow up thinking America is this great nation, and then you look on the news or you have a bad experience and you're like, wow. It's just like, when you grow up and you look at your parents as like the shining star of perfection, and then that breaks one day,
Yeah, the
That's
golden age.
exactly
Yeah.
everybody goes through that. Is America perfect? No fucking way. I don't need to be like a bootlicker to realize that it's still a great place to live. I still have amazing rights as a woman that I wouldn't. I absolutely do, but that doesn't mean I can't say it's I can't go through a story with Superman a little helping other nations. That's crazy to me.
I think I feel compelled to say one thing: why the independent comic book market is exploding, and why the big two are suffering a little bit. And the reason why the big two suffer a little bit is that every time they try to take their characters to actually fight injustice, they get pushback. And I want to be very clear on this: Captain America and Superman. Steve Rogers, Captain America. Let's just delve into the weeds, shall we? Captain America, Steve Rogers, and Kal-El Superman, they don't fight injustice. They have always only fought crime. Because guess what happens when you fight crime? When you defeat Lex Luthor goes to jail and he gets out. You reset the status quo. Everybody's happy. It's the status quo. It's the status quo. Captain America defeats Red Skull. Okay, well, it's Hydra agents. It's not Nazis. It's Hydra agents. Oh, Red Skull goes to jail. He comes back, or he's reborn again. We reset the status quo. But when you actually fight injustice, you can't reset the status quo. If you actually address climate change, you can't address you don't do the reset.
Look out your window.
If you address crime in other countries, if you actually deal with injustice on a global scale, it's more difficult to reset the status quo. And in traditional superhero comics, that's very, very difficult to do. That's problematic because you can't. It's much easier to reset the status quo when you're just stopping the Joker from once again gassing another group of people at a bank robbery. Whoop-de-doo. That's an easy reset.
Exactly.
You can't do that when you actually confront or come up with a storyline that's more complex, that actually has consequences. It's much more difficult to reset the status quo. Now, don't get me wrong. I get it. I'm conservative too in many ways, but I'm just saying I'm not going to fault DC Comics for having John Kent actually say, well, maybe I'm going to attack the island nation of Gamora and deal with that asshole Henry Bendix, and maybe I don't care what the United Nations says about sovereignty. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm willing to suspend and say, okay, this is a superhero that's willing to go above and beyond. And guess what? An entire new generation of readers are a little bit tired of the same old tropey stories. And guess what? The evidence of this I use to support my argument. Look at some of the top selling independent indie comics right now. Look at their subject matter. Guess what? A lot of them are fighting injustice. A lot of them, they're not worried about, they don't have to reset the status quo. And that's why they're so damn good. They don't have to worry about, we gotta undo that. We gotta undo that thing we made that one main character do because it's problematic. They don't have to worry about it. So I'm much more forgiving when DC or Marvel goes out on a limb and does something a little bit more controversial, because it's like, and maybe it's because I'm old school, but I'm collecting so bloody long that I want something different, and I'm not afraid of change. And these people that think that the sky is falling because, God forbid, Christopher Cantwell wrote an issue of Captain America. Oh, woe for me. Grow up. Grow up. Seriously.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous.
That's what I like about you, Rockies. When you get under your bit, you get heated like that. You just say it as it is.
Well, ultimately, like, the most problematic thing is that, I mean, Tristan said it earlier about, like, people are never happy. Like, people always think in absolutes, which is like, come on, we've all heard Obi-Wan's advice: only a Sith deals in absolutes, or, like, in my terms, I always say only a bitch deals in absolutes. Because it's mindless and it's easy. People are like, I want change, and then as long as I get change, it's okay. Well, no, like, there's nuance, right? Like, no nut November. How about no nuance November, guys? Like, it's time to start thinking about things a little bit more complicated. You can make change happen. It just has to be well executed, and it has to be developed organically through the storytelling. In the to the same extent, yes, there are certain things that that are proven to be tent poles for these characters. Like, we're not going to have Bruce Wayne punch somebody through the fucking skull, right? Like, it's just not going to happen, because there are certain qualities, right? There are certain qualities to this character's, like, moral certain qualities of these characters, like moral integrity and his moral compass, that will always kind of remain the same. It will then just be superimposed upon whatever the sort of modern social and political climate is that the story is being told. So, like, yeah, it's problematic. Like, people don't actually look in between. People just kind of want these super vague concepts to be expressed without going a little bit deeper into the just the nuance of it all. It's just about the execution. Technically, anything can work. You can make almost anything work in any storytelling medium, but especially in something like comics that is so wide and varied and massive in scale. It just has to be well executed. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's actually why I am for Man of Action, quit it.
Yeah.
I'm actually not mad at the Son of Kal-El. I would say it's slow moving. I would say it is something that is very different. I don't mind the climate change aspects of it, and it's allegorical, right?
And it ended up not amounting to much anyway besides a cover.
Exactly.
Well, and there was some stuff with the ocean, like, a
Mhm.
little bit with the monster and stuff, but I actually really enjoyed that issue.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
the whole idea of John being a little bit different than his father, looking at things differently, maybe from a more social and political art right now. Kids growing up are much, much more social and much more politically inclined and educated at a younger age. It would make sense
Yeah.
for John to be the same. And he's doing nothing wrong. He's not like what was the worst thing he did? Like, he broke in and tried to get information.
And he
What's
cheated
wrong?
with Lex at chess.
And the only thing I really have an issue with there is that oh my god, I totally forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, I started
I'm the
reading
one that's drinking. What's going on?
I said the only thing I don't have an issue with, and then I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh my god, I'm so sorry.
The
I
stuff
wanted
with
to address though. Potato Tomato said I missed the super chat about Jace Fox.
I think that was
Do
from
you
last
get
time, I think.
okay? I wanted to. I don't. I think that character will last. I do think it has legs if it is
Well, he
like
last as
we see.
Batman though.
No, I don't. I think Damian honestly is going to take over. I do.
I think
But
eventually he'll give up the Batman to and be someone else. If for no other reason, then Ridley will be off of him, and someone else will come in and be all like, "Okay, but just so we can hype it up, I'm gonna give him a new identity."
maybe that one cover still makes me think Damian's going to take over. But um, I think with Jace, getting him out of Gotham was the only logical answer to make that character last. He needs his own rogues gallery. Honestly, he kind of needs his own identity. He needs to come into his own and then maybe go, well, I was Batman and then this happened and I experienced this, and we need to learn to love that character. If he gets the legs, and I think John Ridley's showing how good he is at Black Panther, he can do it. It's just going to take some time. He's only like that Second Son stuff wasn't great for me, and then it's getting slowly better. But I think it'll last. I do, and I'm more optimistic now than I was at the beginning of the stream because you said Jessica Cruz, so I'm happy. Love Jessica.
Oh yeah, I just read it up the EW, the Entertainment Weekly article. Yeah, he's actually right. He mentioned the Williamson does mention Jessica and some of the others.
Oh yeah, that's what
You know, the
happened
funny
when I
thing
tried
is-
to get to the news first.
I
Funny
think
thing-
it's worth
Sorry.
pointing out that let's look at Marvel's experience with the all different Marvel in 2015, about how it was very controversial. There was a replacement of classic characters
Mhm.
with these new characters.
All
It
at
was
once,
very-
yeah.
It was very divisive. And Marvel made some editorial mistakes, and they probably put too much emphasis on the new characters to the exclusion of the classic ones. And there were some mistakes being made. And in many ways, DC is almost kind of doing that now, I think. I'm not necessarily, and there maybe they're going to make some of the similar mistakes. Maybe one, you could, mileage can vary on the arguments back and forth as to whether or not the degree to which DC is making some mistakes in terms of how maybe they're sort of like putting the big characters on the side with the death of Justice League. But frankly, this is an evolution. This isn't a replacement. This is an evolution of a universe. It's growing, it's evolving. It's not
Yeah.
destroying old characters. It's creating new ones to stand alongside them. But occasionally, some characters will get the spotlight more above others. There's nothing new here, and so I refuse to believe that the sky is falling. And this goes into our debate that we had. Uh, uh, Tristan with
Yes.
Shane Davis, and I respect, and let's be clear, I agree with some of the points Shane Davis made, that there are some reasons to be cynical. Let's be honest there. There's some reasons to be
Right.
cynical, but to me, it's like I choose to be, I might as well cite somebody far smarter than me. I mean, it's like Einstein said, you can choose to believe in a friendly universe or an unfriendly one. I choose to believe in a friendly one. Let's be optimistic. I mean, everything's going to be okay. We have our superheroes. It's all good. Storytelling is evolving. I mean, after 40 years, I mean, should I not maybe evolve my sensibilities here? Do I really need to have the same old story retold me 12 different ways? Is the sky falling because God forbid we have characters that are fighting injustice as opposed to simply crime? And bear in mind, my reference here, I want to give a shout out to, it was a New York Times podcast where they interviewed a number of science fiction writers, and they spoke specifically about superheroes, and they talked about the soap opera idea of storytelling in comic books and why comic books have stagnated. And they actually specifically say it's because comic books generally don't deal with injustice; they deal with crime.
Mhm.
And when you deal with injustice, you can't have soap opera like storytelling, because once you deal with injustice, you can't reset the status quo. Science fiction resets the status quo. And so, that's the appeal of science fiction in terms of reimagining a totally different world. That's why the independent market of comic books right now is thriving, is because these creators are being let loose. They're not restricted by what the big two forces them to maintain a status quo on. And what I find so frustrating are some critics of the big two are getting all pissed off saying, I don't want Superman to do this, I don't want Captain America to do that. Well, no offense, but you got like 50 years of comic books you can fall back on. Go to your back.
Mhm.
I mean, we got a new generation here. And to quote Mark Waid, and I love quoting Mark Waid because it pisses him off even more. I'm going to quote Mark Waid when he says, I mean, every generation deserves to have comic books speak to them.
Mhm.
That's the truth.
And-
And move along. Let's move forward, not backwards.
Move along.
And like I mean, the earth is splitting, because I completely agree with you, Rock. Like it's like and it comes down to that conversation about nuance. Like we can change, we can move with the times, and we can make things that are applicable and relatable for now and for the future. But you can do that while maintaining the sort of tent poles of why these characters matter, why they're iconic. Like despite not liking the actual run itself, I liked the idea of James Tynion's Batman run, moving Batman into that sort of middle point between the classic, never changing sort of status quo and Batman Beyond, right? We're bringing Batman a new rogues gallery of characters that better represent the flaws of today's society, because while in some ways they're similar, we've exacerbated so many different things because of what's available to us now with things like the internet and instant access to communication and like the 24-hour news cycle. Do I think he executed it well? Not so much. But conceptually, we can do that, right? We can tell stories about characters who are evergreen, working through these sort of obstacles of today. But we have to do that with, again, respect and gratitude to what's come before. And the
Right.
problem is that unfortunately that lack of nuance, people will go and carry and deal in absolutes, right? Like people go full steam ahead into change, and like Rocky was saying in the case of Marvel, where they're kind of hampering and quieting and insulating the legacy characters that came before, or people or companies can be a little bit too cyclical and be a little bit too conservative with the continuity and with their stories, and that's how you end up with I mean, honestly, I can't think of a specific, but I mean, I felt like death metal and metal were just kind of regurgitations of like old crises that have come before it. It felt like nothing was really moving the needle. But a lot of folks would disagree with me. Point being is, I think that we can make change and we can make it great and we can make it matter to the fans and to the characters, but there has to be a certain level of tempering that goes into that whole reaction.
Mm-hmm. And if I can add one other thing, what Rocky was saying about how a lot of people they want characters to actually fight the injustices. There's one downside about that though, that so many people when they do that, they make them into tyrants. You get the authority wanting to take over the world and everything because they know what's best. You start to get the asshole heroes, and that's the one downside I think with it. You need to find. I think what would be fresh is if we get people who are actually fighting the injustices, but doing it with a nuance that doesn't result in the world dominating heroes.
Yeah, I think that's why you're also seeing a prevalence of black label titles, and I think is because they're more writers. I mean, frankly, if I was going to become a writer, I'd rather have a black label title than have to try to conform my story. I mean, I admit I got like a kick-ass Wonder Woman story in my head that's been brewing for decades, but I mean, I don't think I could squeeze it into the mainstream continuity, because I know 50% of the fan base would probably have a shit fit if they understood my main plot points. But I mean, I would have to black label it, because it was just because you have more freedom. But in any event, I also think though that one thing about having a continuity rich universe is that it inspires creativity. Continuity should inspire creativity and storytelling, not take away from it. And what's frustrating is when there's always half measures. Well, you get a story that kind of incorporates continuity, but it butchers the other half. And it used to be in the old days that you could, you got a sense that the writers passionately knew what was going on. One of the things I got when my interview with Jeremy Adams, what impressed me so much is that he talked about now what is Jeremy Adams doing right now? He's reading like 10 years worth of Flash comics.
That's awesome.
He's passionate about it. I mean,
Yeah.
how many writers actually do that? Because nowadays I get the impression that most of them are they don't give a shit. They're just writing the next narrative and blah 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 blah, and the editors don't care.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, it's there is something to say about passion, and we're never going to be able to get what Chuck Dixon refers to as the lifers, the guys that are in comic books for their whole life. We're not going to, I understand we used to have the lifers, okay, but that's gone the way of the dodo bird, just like birds, dinosaurs evolved into birds, right? So we're evolving the comic book industry. I don't know what a comic book's going to look like 200 years from now, but something tells me it ain't going to look like a floppy right now. Okay. It's going to be different.
Right.
So things are changing, and, we gotta change with them, but one thing that will always stay, that will, to me, will define the best writers is the passion and the way they talk about the comics, and with the passion and the knowledge automatically comes the continuity. Because I'll tell you this about Jeff Johns. I don't think Jeff Johns knows how to write a DC comic book story without being honorable to continuity.
Oh,
really,
yeah.
I mean,
I think Williamson's the same way.
Yeah, I mean, they're that passionate, and that's the saving grace with Williamson. I've had issues, same with Trevor with Williamson. I wasn't a big fan of his Flash run, but he's won me over with his Robin, and I gotta say, even though he's playing, at least he's playing with the action. Let's put it this way: Joshua Williamson and I, we own the same action figures. And we're in the same sandbox. I might disagree with his story, but I love watching him play.
Exactly. I mean, especially the fact he's using the Gentry from Multiversity. I never think anyone was ever going to use those guys. And what he's doing with it, you're like, wow. Though that fact you're saying this is the final chapter and all this stuff, believe it when I see it. But what won me over was his Flash run, and it took well until they got to it, was Flash War. How he actually tied into what Jeff Johns left dangling since Flash Rebirth with his Zoom and Reverse Flash and everything. It's the fact that you actually are like, wow, I didn't think anyone was ever going to tap into it, but sure enough, he did, and he did some great stuff with it. And then later revealing, Reverse Flash is responsible for Zoom, every bad thing in his life. Makes sense, because either he's wrong, and he was wrong about the clown, or someone changed the rules. Either way, makes sense.
So let's take a look real quick before we go at the Kickstarter. And then
it hasn't moved.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, it is what it is, man.
I gotta share it off, or I'll share it off on my community post. I have the stream shared off, but I'll put it there. Make sure you guys check it out. Of course, I really think you'll enjoy it. I honestly, I don't embrace things I don't personally enjoy. But Soup, you got anything going on your channel you want to tell everybody about?
Yes. So tomorrow we're doing a live stream. We're talking about legal stuff with the whole Marilyn Manson thing, which is going to be fun. But that's it for now. But yeah, that's at 3 p.m. tomorrow.
Awesome. Right. What about you, Robert?
I've been doing very well with my Pro Teaches Noobs series of videos. I just did a new one today talking about the DC Trinity, their 1 year later stories after Infinite Crisis, and yeah, it's been doing really well. I'm thinking about tweaking the format and having it doesn't have to be actual comic noobs that I have on. It could be anyone who just isn't aware of the stories. For example, anyone here know about the comic Godland? Yeah, that's why I saw it. I can bring anyone on. Yeah, I can bring anyone on to talk about that comic, for example.
Google knows about it.
Yeah, but and also waiting for whenever you and I can sit down and do Earth 1 eventually.
Oh yes, I will get to you with that. So Rocky, you always have your reviews up. Tell us a little bit about your channel.
Well, I do mostly DC comic weekly reviews, and I occasionally do an indie comic review. I'm going back into Spawn Daily with Jace. Jace has been Jace of the Comic Source podcast. Him and I both do Spawn Daily. We review an issue of Spawn starting from issue 1. We want to do all 300 issues of Spawn. I've just been my daughter's been in the hospital. She's been diagnosed as a diabetic, and so my wife and I are just learning the ins and outs of getting the needles and the carbs and the carb counting and all that jazz. And Audrey's doing fine, but it's taken away from my Spawn Daily. But we'll slowly be getting in the groove of that. And there's 18 DC comics coming out next week. It's insane, but it's just. But so I might have to break that up into two videos. But there's so much of DC coming out, and there's a lot to like with DC. There's some to really love, and there's some that maybe you could discard. But man, it's I got to tell you, it's very interesting when you review an entire publishing line. It's very interesting. You can kind of see I can appreciate the good all the more, but boy, the stinkers, I can certainly see why certain titles in my mind maybe need a little bit more attention, a little bit more love. But in any event, yeah. So yeah, check out my channel, and thanks for having me on, Nerdette.
No problem. And of course, Trevor, I have everything's linked in the description, guys. Also, so you know, I'll add Robert's channel after. That was a little add-on. But Trevor, tell us again. About you. Are you still doing your comic book like your series you were doing?
I haven't posted a YouTube video in like half a year. But I mean, I always have ambitions to go back. So before I kind of got a little bit too busy for videos, I started this series that was essentially I called it Chronicles of a Comic Book Creator, where I kind of took readers or aspiring creators behind the scenes and talked about how the sauce is made, right? Not specifically with my series, but just the process of, basically from the jump, how you start with an idea. How do you determine whether or not it's a story that has legs, whether it's specifically a story that will fit the comic book medium as opposed to another, and moving forward. So the goal of that series was essentially to kind of make it a chronological series where we literally started with the first episode on the idea. And then the second was, for example, how the comic book script functions, the different formats of a script, what type of ways can you convey what what's in your head versus how it's going to be interpreted then by an artist, or how to give direction, or whether or not you're the writer to give an extensive amount of visual direction, and determining whether or not the collaborator that you need is somebody who is going to perform the function of taking on a lot more of those storytelling duties, or whether you're being descriptive in the way that you handle things. I'd like to go back to it. I always say that I'm going to do it, but I never really know. So I can't promise anything, but the first 3 episodes of that are up, and they all did like really well. I think one of them it did like 16,000 views. So somebody
Oh,
liked
that's
it.
awesome.
So if you're interested in seeing how the sauce is made, feel free to check that out. But primarily, I hope you guys consider checking out the 4th Kickstarter to my comic book. This is, again, going to be the last opportunity where the first prints of all 4 issues are going to be made available. I have plans of reprinting issue 1, but again, it's going to have a different cover. It's going to be designed a little bit differently. So for all of you collectors out there, hop on this now while you still have the opportunity. And yeah, I hope you give it a look, man. Like it's ironic that I got pegged as being of a very particular political affiliation, despite the fact
I'm
that
so sorry.
no, it's
Oh
okay,
my
man. Like
gosh.
people on the internet are reactive, and like I said, bitches dealing absolutes. Um,
Yeah.
so you know, I will say this in my defense. I'm probably the most politically moderate person I know. I
Mhm.
actually am a registered Republican, despite what people might think. And I'll openly admit that. But hey, if you don't like it, you don't like it, and that's cool too. But I tried to make this story relatable and accessible, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, no matter what walk of life you come from. This is just a story about people, man. It's about identity, mental health, loss, reconciliation with memory. And it's wrapped in sci-fi and real hard science, like Nerdette had alluded to earlier. I have a background in molecular biology. It's what I went to school for. So all of this science springboards from real science, which is a lot of fun. Um, and I try to make it as engaging as humanly possible and really roll in characters that are impactful and emotional and cerebral. And yeah, it's a tight character driven story. And if I can shout out my art team, these guys are fantastic. They make me look 10 times better than I actually am, and I'm super fortunate for that. So Marcelo Salazar, my inker, Marcio Freddy, my colorist, my letterer, who is just an industry standard, Taylor Esposito, the gold standard, I should say, in the industry. So consider giving it a look. These guys worked hard. I worked really hard. And supporting independent storytelling with your money, or even the resource of sharing these links with people that might be interested, is a huge help, and a way to keep storytelling inspired, particularly in a medium like comics. So I also want to say thank you to everybody that had something kind to say in the chat. And obviously, Tristan, thank you so much for having me on and for
No
continuing to champion
problem.
my work. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally worth it. I promise you. And I want to say thank you to Bianca, myself in comics. I love it. It just says for the sticker, Shiva dog gifting a large bone, bowing respectfully. It's such a description. It's so good. Thank you so much, Bianca. We are going to take off for the night, but thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you everyone on the panel, and we will see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.